Our first speaker is Dr. Kwok Dr. Kwok is the former William F. Cole Professor of Christian Theology and Spirituality at Episcopal Divinity School. She has also taught at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Auburn Theological Seminary, Union Theological Seminary, and Yale Divinity School, and is currently teaching at Emory University. Professor Kwok's research focuses on Asian feminist theology and post-colonial theology. She has written or edited 20 books in English and Chinese. If I went through all of the things that deserve to be said, there wouldn't be time for her paper. But here are some of them. Occupy Religion, Theology of the Multitude, Post-Colonial Imagination and Feminist Theology, Introducing Asian Feminist Theology, Discovering the Bible in the Non-Biblical World, and Chinese Women and Christianity, History 1860 to 1927. Professor Kwok has also received multiple honorary doctorates, is a past president of the American Academy of Religion, and is co-founder of the Pacific Asian North American Asian Women in Theology and Ministry Network. Her paper this morning is entitled The Study of World Christianity from a Post-Colonial Perspective. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kwok.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I am delighted to have this opportunity to learn from my colleagues about this very important topic, global Christianities, perspectives, methods, as well as challenges. The title of my paper is The Study of World Christianity from a Post-Colonial Perspective. I want to ask the audience, how many of you have been to a church in China? We have a few. Were they full? Very full, okay. So several years ago, I had the opportunity of visiting this mega church that is called Chongyi Church in Hangzhou, China. The sanctuary can seat 5,000 people. It was all full, even before the service began. We were told 1,000 children and young people attended the Sunday school, and the team of Sunday school teachers was more than 100. Wow! This phenomenal growth of churches in communist China has caught many by surprise. The official statistics put the number of Christians in China to be around 25 to 30 million. But the unofficial figure ranged somewhere between 80 to 100 million, if we counted those who belonged to the house churches. So China is poised to be the country with the highest number of Christians in the world. World Christianity as a field has moved away from a Euro or Euro-American centered interpretation of Christianity and recognized the global configurations of Christianity in all its diversity and complexities. The Christian demographics, as many of us know, has shifted to the global south. By 2025, half of the Christian population will live in Latin America and Africa. Another 17% will live in Asia. Only 1 out of 5 will be non-Latino whites. So what can be learned from this changing demographic, and how can the study of Chinese Christianity contribute to our understanding of world Christianity? Here, I wanted to introduce to you this eminent scholar of Chinese history. In 1984, Professor Paul A. Cohen published this very important book, Discovering History in China, in which he discussed different models of the study of Chinese history in the West. The first model he called the Western Impact Chinese Response model, which treats the Chinese as passive and reactive in the historical encounter. Using this model to study world Christianity, the focus will be on the role of missionaries, while downplaying the agency of Chinese Christians. The second model, he calls it the cultural imperialism model, which treats Chinese Christian mission as an integral part of Western domination. This has been the dominant view in the historiography of Chinese mission in China after 1949. But since the late 70s, other interpretations began to emerge. Chinese scholars such as Wang Lixin has reassessed the legacy of Christian mission, the contribution of Christian colleges, and the encounter between Chinese women and Christianity. Paul Cohen criticized these two models and suggests a third. He calls it the China-centered model, which begins with Chinese problems set in a Chinese context and seeks to understand the internal structure or direction to Chinese history that precedes from the earlier centuries. So instead of beginning from the West, as in the Western impact or cultural imperialism model, this third model begins with the Chinese as the protagonist of the unfolding drama of the interaction between Christianity and Chinese society. Taking the cue from Cohen, we will look at the development of Chinese Christianity from the very beginning, and not from the time when Western missionaries arrived in China. This is the ancient Silk Road, all the way from Turkey and Syria, from the west to Chang'an, the ancient capital of China. So along the Silk Road, you have the interaction or cultural exchange between the Christians, the Buddhists, the Muslims, and other religious traditions for a very long time. Some of the leading post-colonial theorists hailed along the Silk Road. This is Jerusalem, where Edward Said was born and later grew up in Egypt. This is the present-day Mumbai, called Bombay, where Homi Bhabha, the author of The Location of Culture, came from. And this is Calcutta, where Gayatri Spivak, another leading post-colonial theorist, grew up and attended high school. So I suggest it is no coincidence. Some of the leading post-colonial theorists will be theorizing from the multiplicity of culture and the interplay of different religious traditions. So today, I propose a post-colonial cross-cultural approach to the study of world Christianity. It has three characteristics. The first one, Christianity was a hybrid phenomenon from the very beginning. Therefore, it requires a cross-cultural and inter-religious approach to study it. The missionary movement is part of global modernity. And then we need to use a comparative approach to study Christianity from the South to the South. My first point, hybrid Christianity. As many of us know, Christianity emerged from the Jewish and Gentile communities influenced by Hellenistic culture living in the Roman Empire. From the beginning, it was a cultural hybrid, negotiating with and integrating various cultural and religious elements. During the missionary movement, that Paul initiated, he went along the Mediterranean and then traveled in Asia Minor. Unfortunately, history has been taught from the Mediterranean and then took a big leap to Europe and then to America, and then forgot there was another branch that was ancient and important. You know, it is this root, the Church of the East. Before Christianity was dominant in the north, let us not forget, it traveled to the south, to Africa, and to the east, along the Silk Road. Christianity spread with commerce, with missionary activities, and also with intercultural exchange. Here you can see the metropolitan centers of this spread of Christianity to the east. So then, if we pay attention to the development of missionary activities in the Church of the East, we will recognize Christianity reached India and China very early on. Some even believed that St. Thomas himself went to Kerala, India, and died as a martyr there in the 1st century. We do not know whether that legend can be proved. But here, I'm showing you this St. Thomas cross in Kerala, India. The earliest type of these crosses can be found as way back as the 8th century. You can see the cross was on top of the lotus, a very important symbol for Buddhism. And then it shows an arch to the door. What is it? Well, according to Gudrun Lola, this cross appears to be surrounded by a Pharan, an ornamental archway known in Buddhist and Hindu temples. And then, if we travel further east, and then you will come to Chang'an, the ancient capital of China. Here, you have the famous Nestorian tablet. Syrian missionaries arrived as early as the 7th century, and this tablet detailed their activities, which also showed a cross on top of a lotus flower. Before I show you the cross, let us remind ourselves of the spread of Buddhism. And here you have the cross. Again, you have the Nestorian cross on top of the lotus. This art historian, Laura, says this type of cross is more a sign of the resurrected and cosmic Christ than of the dead one. The development of Christianity in India and China show that the Christian messages and even symbolisms had to be translated into the vernacular and local idioms. As the late Professor Naman Sanet has reminded us, the translation of Christian message across different cultures and religions has given rise to tremendous plurality and diversity of expression in world Christianity. This means that Christianity has always been polycentric and has been reconstituted and reimagined in diverse cultures. Here I want to quote Professor Titi Tianliu. Polycentric Christianity is Christian faith with many cultural homes. The fact that Christianity is at home in a multiplicity of cultures without being permanently wedded to any of them presents for Christians everywhere a unique opportunity for examining Christian identity and Christian theology. I had the opportunity to read the Chinese on the Nestorian tablet. It talks about Trinity, It talks about baptism, but it did not talk about the suffering or the crucifixion. Why? In 7th century China, influenced by Buddhism, it would have been difficult for the Chinese to understand how a dead man hanging on the cross will be surviving. Can you see that even within theology, not just artistic symbol, there has been adaptation from early on. Now I come to my second point, global modernity. In the 8th century, Rome turned its attention to the north and formed alliances with the Germanic people. From the 8th century to the 15th century, Christianity expanded in the north and west, while as the Church of the East shrank. So many would associate Christianity with Western civilization, and it spread to different parts of the world through commerce, colonialism, and Christian missions. Now, Christian missionary activities were an integral part of the civilizing mission of the West, while indigenous cultures in the Americas, Africa, or Asia were denigrated as backward and inferior. There is this binary construction in the study of world history. Some societies are or were designated as traditional, while other societies would be seen as modern. It is important to remember what Edward Said, one of the pioneers in post-colonial studies, has reminded us in his book Orientalism, published in 1978, and I quote, "Orientalism can be discussed and analyzed as the corporate institution for dealing with the Orient." Here, he meant the Middle East. Dealing with it by making statements about it, authorizing views of it, describing it, by teaching it, settling it, ruling over it. In short, Orientalism is a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. This Orientalist biases is clearly evident in the works of an earlier generation of missionaries and scholars who studied the Christian missionary movement in China. Here you have the volume published in 1922 with the unfortunate title, "The Christian Occupation of China," which detailed missionary activities, the scope and extent of their work in China. Later, we have the almost classic text on the history of Christian missions in China, written by Kenneth Letheret. So thick, really classic. Both, though not the same, but certainly will think the Western missionaries had done great service in emancipating China. So now, given that we are learning from the post-colonial theorists not to construct tradition and modernity in binary way, how can we look at modernity anew? Here, let me cite three possibilities. This first one treats Latin America, Africa, the Pacific, or other non-Western societies as occupying the underside of modernity. Dale Irwin used this. So there is modernity defined by Western advanced industrialization, and then because of colonization, there was an underside. The second one, proposed by Erica Dussault, following Menino, then it constructed modernity as not just one process, but two processes. which are joined together. The formation of the modernity could not happen without the colonization of vast population of the world. That is why you have a slash, modernity and coloniality. I would like to propose, from colleagues who have studied Chinese history, a third possibility that is called global modernity. Here, I want to cite a Turkish scholar who has devoted his professional career studying China. Modernity all along has been global in scope, plural in form and direction, and hybrid not only across cultural boundaries, but also in the relationship of the modern to the traditional. It is important to highlight modernity as global in scope. Extending this study to world Christianity, Ryan Dunge says, the local agents and host environment exerted influences in the adaptation, negotiation, and adjustment of missionary efforts and intercultural communication. He continues, recognition of the agency exercised by the recipient society is a major reason why cultural differentiation is now seen as part of globalization along with homogenization, because every claim universal is translated into existing cultural matrices in which it can take on different meanings or be employed in different ways. Now let me come back to cite China as an example. Scholars often credit missionaries for introducing Western notions of womanhood, regarded as enlightened and modern, in contrast to those in traditional Chinese culture. Such generalization overlooks that both Chinese and Western understanding of womanhood changed over time. Women missionaries who came to China in the 19th and early 20th century were influenced by the ideals of womanhood and evangelical view of domesticity of the Victorian period. In the United States, women missionaries were influenced by the cult of womanhood, which could be characterized by piety, purity, submissiveness, and domesticity. They saw the Chinese customs of foot binding, concubinage, and arranged marriage incompatible with their ideal of monogamous marriage and educated womanhood. They were often credited with bringing more egalitarian views of the sexes to the Chinese society. Yet, back home, they were considered traditional by the more radical feminists. Here you have the picture of domesticity. Can you contrast this with this picture? Which one is more radical? That is why Marjorie King argues that 19th century American women missionaries exported Western notions of domesticity and did not contradict the Chinese notion that women's place was in the home. The missionaries did not export any kind of feminism understood by their counterparts in the US at that time to China. They even included sewing or embroidery or domestic work in the curriculum for women's girls' schools. Now, the situation of China changed very rapidly in the late 19th and early 20th century. This year, we as Chinese commemorated the May 4th movement, the centennial of this important student protest against Western imperialism in China. So female students took to the street 100 years ago in May to protest with their male counterparts foreign aggression. And as they were protesting, what did their women missionary teacher tell them? Did they encourage them to protest? Give a guess. Not quite. They were not the radical ones back home. They were not eager to support the students under their tutelage to be protesters or to fight for Chinese salvation. So, today, when we look at this past history, would we say simply Western women missionaries, they brought modern notions of womanhood to China? The story was much more complicated. The evangelical ideals that wives should be educated, keep the house tidy and clean, and help their husbands reflected Western response to the Industrial Revolution and other social changes. Chinese notions about womanhood affected missionary visions and their strategies working with women. Some of the women missionaries changed their views of looking at the world and themselves after working for a long time in China. In one particular case, it was the change in women's leadership in the church that changed the whole world Anglican Communion. Here is a picture in 1945. In the center of the picture is the Reverend Florence Emory, who was ordained to be the first women priest in the worldwide communion in 1944. And then, because of the controversy surrounding her ordination, the people in UK, United Kingdom, said we had to investigate, learn something about it, and there was also a push within United Kingdom to have women being considered to be priests. So it was not UK influenced China, it was the other way around. In case you have forgotten, it was not until 1992 that the Church of England allowed women to be ordained, decades afterwards. So I move on to my third point, comparative study from South to South. Both the Christian impact, indigenous response, and the cultural imperialism models of studying world Christianity focus on the relations between the global north and individual countries or societies of the global south. The study of world Christianity has called our attention to local agencies. In the past decades, we have produced many important works that study Christianity from the global south. 30 years ago, when I began to do the research on Chinese women and Christianity, there were very few comparable studies. I had to borrow the insights from those who were studying African American women in the United States to learn how to do this. Today, I am happy to report there are many more studies that talks about women's interaction with Christianity from the global south. That is why the time has come for not just London and Shanghai or New York and Fuzhou, that kind of study. We should be learning China, India, China, Iran, China, and Uganda. How can we do it? Let me just give an example. The Church Missionary Society, a society organized by the Anglican Church, has been involved in many parts of the world, in mission work. Three important foci of their work. One, evangelism. Two, education. Third, medicine. So here we have a scholar, Francis de Guenny, who has studied religious feminism in an age of empire, CMS women missionaries in Iran. So if we compare the situation of women's work in Iran and China, we will notice two very important observations. One, the use of female education to gain access to the populace. Second, we certainly want to know in what way Christianity interacts with the religious traditions in China or in Iran. In China, most of the early converts, they came from practicing Chinese popular religion. In Iran, certainly it was the Muslim tradition that was dominant. So a cross-cultural study between these societies would find how women negotiated multiple religious identities, communal pressure, family pressure in becoming Christian. Let me move on to India. In India, as in China, the early converts came from the lower class. Why? The established elites would not allow their women or their daughters to follow a foreign religion. So it would be of interest to study how the lower class women in China became interested in Christianity, and to compare and contrast how Dalit women from India were particularly interested in joining the church. Why? They had very little to lose, isn't it? Because they could then learn to read, they could become Bible women, and they could even teach the higher class women how to read. So for them, it might be a chance to improve their social mobility, to give themselves a better chance of life. Now I want to talk about China and Africa, because in these two contexts, we had numerous studies or discussion on how the CMS missionaries or the missionary societies had tried to deal or failed to deal with a very important question, that is polygamy. In China, in the 19th century, the richer families had, the husband had more than one wife. And in Africa, even today, in some societies, we have polygamous marriages. Now, how did the missionaries respond to that situation? In China, and also, for example, in Uganda, the CMS missionaries, they had to be very careful. On the one hand, they did not want to then stir up trouble. The elites, the men who had power, they would not want missionaries to change this practice. But on the other hand, many of the missionaries subscribed to nuclear monogamous family. So it would be very useful and interesting to compare and contrast how women in these two societies negotiate with new religious identity, new forms of teachings about marriage and family, and new understandings of womanhood. So in conclusion, I want to suggest we need dynamic and interactive frameworks that recognize multiple possibilities, fluid frontiers, and creative adaptations in the study of world Christianity. We need to emphasize on the receptors rather than the transmitters, and on local agencies in the missionary and indigenous encounter. As Ryan Dench reminds us, homogenization and differentiation are simultaneous and mutually conditioning dimensions of globalization. The study of world Christianity can contribute to our understanding of the construction of a modern order that is an ongoing global cultural process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kwok, for an eminently compelling and clear paper.